Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our videos about cardiac physiology. In this video, we are going to be talking about the cell types of the heart. The heart has two main cell types. We've got the pacemaker, also known as autorhythmic cells. And the job of these cells is to conduct electrical signals through the heart. Okay. Our other main cell type in the heart is contractile cells, whose job it is to contract, okay? And both of these are actually technically muscle cells. So we'll see that in these slides that are coming up. Okay, so let's talk about each of these cell types one at a time, starting with the pacemaker cells or the autorhythmic cells, okay? So like I just mentioned, the pacemaker cells are a type of muscle cell. They're modified muscle cells. They don't really function like a muscle, but just technically they're muscle cells. They're very small and they have very few contractile fibers. They make up a small portion of the total number of cells in the heart. So they make up about 1% of the heart's muscle cells. And their job is to generate and conduct the electrical signal that tells the contractile cells to contract. Okay, so their job is to be the kind of the communicator of the signal. They pass that on to the contractile cells, and then the contractile cells contract. These cells establish the heart rate, as we'll talk about more a little bit later. And they're autorhythmic. So just looking at the word roots, looking at the name, they generate their own rhythm. What does that mean? Basically, they can generate their own action potentials without outside input from, say, the nervous system. Okay, so they generate their own action potentials, and those action potentials happen regularly in a rhythmic fashion. Okay. So it is because of these cells that we are able to remove a heart from a body. So if, I don't know how many of you have watched videos of heart surgeries, or probably this happened in an Indiana Jones movie at some point, I don't remember. But you know, when you remove a heart from a body, it just contracts on its own without any outside input. The reason for that is because the signal for the heart to contract is being generated from within the heart itself. It's being generated by these pacemaker cells, okay? Okay, so that was the pacemaker cells. Let's move on and talk about the contractile cells. As I said before, the contractile cells, the job of the contractile cells is to contract, okay? And most of the heart's muscle cells are contractile. So let's take a closer look at some of their characteristics. Contractile cells are small cells with one nucleus, okay? So in contrast to skeletal muscle, where we have these multinucleate cells, we just have like kind of individual cells with a single nucleus for these contractile cells. Contractile cells join together through these structures called intercalated discs. Okay, so right here, like looking at this border between two cells, that's an intercalated disc. If you pull them apart, it looks kind of like this. Okay. In the intercalated discs, there are a couple main features that help with the function of the contractile cells. One structure that we can find in intercalated discs is the desmosomes. Okay, so desmosomes are these, like they're called anchoring junctions. They anchor the cells together. So they're kind of like a glue that holds the cells of the heart together. Okay, and that's important because the heart is doing a lot of moving around. It's undergoing a lot of mechanical stress. So the desmosomes like sort of help to just hold everything together. Okay. Then we have the gap junctions. So in the intercalated discs, we also have gap junctions. I want to remind you that gap junctions are basically like channels that lead from one cell to another. And the gap junctions have a very play a very important role in the heart because that's what allows the electrical signals to pass from cell to cell. And that's important because in the heart, we want to coordinate those electrical signals. We want those electrical signals to go from cell to cell so that the cells are receiving their electrical signals at about the same time, which then will lead to contraction in those cells at roughly the same time, which is important for heart function. We want the heart to all contract for the most part at the same time in order to get that pumping action. Okay. Okay. Some more characteristics of contractile cells. They have sarcomeres, right? So I want to remind you that cardiac muscle, which is what this is striated. It's got those stripes. And those stripes come from the arrangement of the sarcomeres. So here you can see those, like that overlap between the thick and thin filaments. So alternating areas of overlap and non-overlap between the thick and thin filaments, okay? Contractile cells are similar to skeletal muscle in many ways, but here are some differences. So we've got large, extensive T-tubules. Another difference is that we have a smaller sarcoplasmic reticulum than in skeletal muscle, and that actually has to do with where the calcium comes from for the muscle contraction in cardiac cells. So I'm not actually going to go into the details of muscle contraction, like the molecular events of muscle contraction in contractile cells, but it's a little bit different than in skeletal muscle. And because of that, you don't have a lot of need to store calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Therefore, you have a smaller sarcoplasmic reticulum in cardiac muscle than in skeletal muscle. But we're not really going over those molecular events, so don't worry too much about that. And finally, of course, as you would expect, you have lots of mitochondria in contractile cells, right? So here's some mitochondria. You need to generate a lot of ATP in order to power all of that muscle contraction that's going to be happening in the contractile cells.